I think with convergence, there's a lot of issues to think about. How who gets access, who doesn't have access. I remember I got my first cell phone when I was in middle school, but that back then there was a lot of people that only had beepers. But now I know people who are 7 years old. They have their parents give them cell phones, and I'm just thinking, whoa, that's way early, and they have MySpace and all those things. And it's just kind of crazy. The age gap keeps getting smaller and smaller, younger and younger.
And it's definitely sold. These products in certain media are given to people with the conception that there's a certain standard of life that everyone has. You know, for example, like you're saying about cell phones being given to young children is, I mean, a cell phone, when Zach Morris had that cell phone, Saved by the Bell, he was, you know, I mean, that was, not that many people had cell phones, but he was really cutting edge for the time. And then we think back at it now, we look at what, you know, his big old apparatus, and we laugh because it's funny because we all have them and they're a part of what we're used to. They're normal, they become natural. And I think that's part of the deal too, is when media, when you no longer see them, when they become so ingrained as part of your life. Who was it? Who was talking about the difference between film and television is that television accepts the responsibility of being part of your daily life. I think it was in the remediation. Whereas when you're watching a film, you're aware of the fact that this film has been made in a different place and time. You allow yourself to be put into a whole new area. It's an entirely imaginary, it's a fictional situation. But with television, we've come to be so used to it that we think we need it. In order to get your daily news, you need television. Television depicts real life. That's the idea. It remediates real life even, which is weird. And we trust it too. You know, the live video footage, you know, your news updated, the stock ticker.
I think one issue that people ignore is the digital divide that convergence create. When you have all that technology converged into one device, such as an iPhone, who can afford it? Nobody. I mean, I know I wouldn't go out and buy it. My phone dies after 1 year of usage, so there's no point for me to invest in a phone that costs so much. So when you think about the trend, it creates a kind of digital divide that a lot of people experience with computers. Not everybody have computer and internet, and convergence technology is just such as the iPhone is just the same.
Yeah, the idea of a luxury becomes, well, it's no longer a luxury, it's an expectation. In order to be able to communicate with the world today, to feel it, to touch it, to be part of it, you have to accept a certain standard of living, you know? You have to have a phone that you can get text messages on, especially in business circumstances these days. You know, I mean, they're talking a little bit, I mean, if we want to continue with the example of the iPhone, why they're not marketing it for business uses more? It's definitely being marketed for lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. I mean, that's what they're selling. So, and this is what we were saying, like last night when we were talking about convergence and what it has to do with pleasure and aspects of pleasure. And I really think that part of what makes Apple good at what they do is the idea that it's a pleasure to use these toys that they have. Their computer, it's almost fun for the user in a way that it isn't really about being so practical. It is about very much how you use your leisure time. And these days, it's becoming more and more common that your leisure time, your time between class, you got your headphones on, you know, your leisure time becomes associated with using media. I mean, in a way, it's always been that way. I mean, or for, at least in the 20th century, when people start going to movies and things, the idea of how you know, what you like to do with your free time, these days
it defines you.
It does define you, yeah, I think so.
I think the price point with Apple also, you know, you can get a little luxury. Maybe everyone might not be able to go out and buy a nice car, but I think everyone pretty much could even save up and get the iPhone if they wanted, or an iPod, and that's something that parents can give their children. And I mean, I hear younger and younger children are getting these devices where, you know, for me when I was growing up, I guess it would be equivalent to video games.
Okay.
Kids die over them now. Because it's kind of like, I mean, yeah, it is a pleasure, and they advertise it as a pleasure. But whenever there's a good thing, there's always some type of bad. And if somebody dies, I mean, there's kids that shoot people over iPods, you know?
I know.
And it'll be like that. It'll be like that with cell phone, with the iPhone too, probably.
And that goes back into the fears that come with technology. You
Yeah.
know, we get to this point where we almost think that technology is happening outside of ourselves. You know, that it's not us that are wanting it, but it's something that's being driven by outside forces on its own. And we have no control over it. And really, we could say we don't want any of this technology, then we could use just the pencil, or we could go back to literature. And, you know, I would think that eventually, when we're so technologically savvy, that, you know, where will kids rebel? Will they become wanting to not be involved in this and be like the hippies, or, you know, will there be a counterculture that will rebel against this? It's kind of scary.
Yeah, there's always an issue of security versus technology. This is part of, yeah, it goes exactly right in with the idea of fear. I think, did anyone else find that the title that Poole used for his article to be vexing? I had a hard time with it. Technologies of freedom. I think I thought of it
ironic and not really freedom.
a little bit. I mean, in a way, technology has freed us. You know, you can be so far away from someone and still be able to tell them whatever message you need to get across. I love you. I miss you. Even if you're on the other end of the world, and it's easy today. And yet, at the same time, what you're talking about security and about people being able to monitor